Yesterday's video was mainly about ESG DIE and the impact that it has on industries, gaming industry, TV, film, comics, and companies that have facilitated this sort of nonsense, Sweet Baby Inc., with a little bit of fun along the way. Today, though, there is a lot more to Sweet Baby Inc. that started to come out, particularly now that the spotlight has been shined upon them. And in a conference in 2019, when they were just getting started and pushing themselves into the industry, oh my goodness me, there are some absolute beauties to behold here. Hi everyone, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface. Most of you by now will probably be aware, something like that, of a company consultation firm called Sweet Baby Inc. They will come into your video game company, they will ESG it up, they will DIE it up, so you can get your money, your funding at a low interest rate from Vanguard or BlackRock to make your game. The game which will then fail miserably in sales because it hasn't been created with the right motives in mind. It's been created purely to adhere to ESG and DIE so that you could get your low interest loans from BlackRock and Vanguard. Do you see how this works now? Details of some unsavory dealings with their employees have come to light, but what I want to focus on today is a conference from 2019 where the CEO took to the podium to address developers and tell them how they can ignore their target audience and start to focus on a tiny, minute fraction who may or may not even be interested in video games because inclusion is more important than actually sales and giving the audience what they want. And I wish that I was joking or embellishing things when I said that, but I'm really not, because we're going to hear it from the horse's mouth herself as she explains in excruciating detail how to hold your company for ransom to force ESG/DIE, aka inclusion and diversity, into your company. Before we go into some other specifics, let's first get some background. The CEO, Belair, is going to tell you about her early dealings with narrative and storytelling from when she was a kid, and I think it's pretty telling.
I wrote about myself a lot, and I would put myself into a lot of art, into a lot of narratives, and I put my family and people who look like me in all of these cool scenarios. And I was telling all these stories where I got to see myself, I got to see people who look like me, and kind of a rainbow of people who were kind of adjacent to me.
I don't really think I have to say too much. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. What I will say is the word me, myself, and I were used quite a lot there. So now let's have a look at what she, as the CEO and a member of Sweet Baby Inc., feels she brings to the table to other companies.
To begin, a lot of the work that I do is in narrative consultation and narrative design. And one of the things that I offer as part of, my list of services is risk assessment and sensitivity reading.
Sensitivity reader. A sensitivity reader is someone who reads a literary work looking for perceived offensive content, stereotypes, and bias. Yes, this is exactly what Sweet Baby Inc. are there to do. For the next 5 minutes or so, it devolves into an intersectional pity party where she keeps trying to paint herself and minorities and all that kind of stuff as victims, because that's the narrative, of course, that they want to push. That is the narrative of ESG and DIE. Then we get an example, a really bizarre example, of what she classes as a inclusion win in a video game and manages to turn it into a defeat somehow.
Imagine me now as a player. It's the first time that I ever made a black character in a video game. This is genuinely embarrassing to relate to a crowd of people.
Believe me, this is going to be genuinely embarrassing.
When I was offered like a character customization screen, I was like, well, I can't put myself in there because that that's weird and not what video games are.
That's the whole point of a character creation screen. So you can make whatever character you want. You can make a character that looks like you. You can make a character that looks like Lara Croft. You can make a character that looks like Morgan Freeman. You can do whatever you want to do. There is nobody with a gun to your head telling you in your personal space at home, sorry, on this character creation screen, you just gotta start making white boys, because that's the way it's meant to be. I think this sounds like utter bullshit. I think it sounds like intersectional victimhood, and I think it's embellishing this narrative, this victim narrative that she wants to push, because that's what fortifies her ESG/DIE drive for these companies.
I made some stubbly white dude protagonists, even when I had every option available to me, because I didn't want to feel like I was putting too much of myself into this world where I didn't.
Well, that's funny, because you just said at the beginning of this piece, and that's why I showed it, you started off with your narrative by constantly writing about you, your family, people that look like you, which I imagine and I take as superficiality of skin color and stuff. You, and then you try to backtrack and go, oh no, I can't put myself in this character creation screen. Oh, the man just won't let me. I'm so oppressed. It's literally pathetic.
But anyway, the first time that I actually made a black protagonist was in Mass Effect in 2010.
2010. So we're not talking about 2019, 2018, 2017. We're going back a decade to 2010, the Mass Effect series. Again, create whatever character you want. And she then decided that she wanted to create a black character the first time, even though she could have in plenty of other games, plenty of other MMO, RPGs, all of the character creation games, sandbox games, whatever they were. No. Only in Mass Effect in 2010 could she do that, or feel that she could do that.
And that felt really, really great. Basically, your fully customized Commander Shepard has to enter a space station and rendezvous with two characters, Jacob Taylor and Miranda Lawson. But you meet Jacob first. And for those of you who don't know, Jacob is a black man. He's a Marine. Your first interaction with him, you're crouching behind cover and you're having a close quarters conversation. And when this happened in the game, it was this really powerful and remarkable moment for me, because it was two black characters talking one-on-one, and neither of them is cast as a criminal. They're not a sidekick. They're not a savage. They're not a stereotype. They're not a gang member.
She said that herself. She said those examples herself. But don't worry, folks. She's now going to take this wonderful moment and somehow spin it as not good enough.
The general idea was, holy moly, representation is cool. But in my Mass Effect experience, this is almost an accidental form of representation.
Here we
It's
go.
something that's a possibility. It's not guaranteed for any player depending on the kind of character and the Commander Shepard that you make. So I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if this wasn't an accident, but it was actually the intention?
Even though she created a black character, she spoke to Jacob, who was also a black person, and had a black-on-black conversation, which to her was the most amazing thing she'd seen in video games. You do you. It wasn't good enough because her character was a character from a character creation screen, and therefore not default as a black character. And therefore, she wants to force her interaction, which to her was special and important, onto other people to take away their own personal interactions, because her intersectional interaction is more important than yours. That's what it essentially boils down to. The game has it perfectly set up. You create your own character. You have your own experiences. She doesn't want that. She wants you to have her experience. It's that narcissism of me, myself, and I from the very beginning, from a child, and it's been embedded in her ever since. It's all about her. Let's see how she's put her marketing degree to good use, shall we?
Is that I actually have a marketing degree. And so I want to put on that very mercenary hat for a second and talk about the way that we decide how we're going to sell the art that we make and how we're going to approach the audiences that we make it for. Because I think so often when people like us get told, from higher ups or from society at large, this isn't what players want, it's not a conversation about content. It's a conversation about demographics.
There she goes. She trips herself up, which is beautiful, because it is a conversation about content. When it's not what we want, it's the content, not the demographic. People don't care if they play as a black character, a brown character, or a female character if they're male, or a male character if they're female. What they're concerned about is the content and the gameplay, that they're fun and engaging and well written. Whereas if you just put forced diversity in, ESG, DIE, and it's as garbagely written as the games which Sweet Baby Inc. have had their hand in, that's when people start to complain. But the whole point of intersectionality is that you become the victim. And so you disregard everything about the content and the bad storytelling and the bad characterization, and you make it all about the superficial, the color of the skin, the gender of the character. She tripped herself up.
Do not make it so that marginalized people, when they're playing your game, have to do all of the work to create representation themselves by creating that custom character.
Customization's not enough. It's not enough that you can customize, make exactly who you want, what you want. Here we go. But she goes even further now.
Also, don't fall into this trap that I think a lot of people fall into, which is they think, okay, don't worry. We can include everyone by making this like single default universal experience that is universally representative. Because usually like all that means, as it did in the dating example, is that you're aiming at your core demographic and you're probably invisibly leaning towards the dominant societal voice.
So what you're trying to say is companies are leaning towards their target audience. Target audience being people who buy the product. And why companies push towards their target audience is because they're their customers. Whereas if you start targeting an audience which is minute and minuscule and not your target audience, and therefore chase off your target audience, you lose a lot of money. I don't think Marxist marketing and actual sales work conducively together. If I'm producing a product and I look at the demographics of my customers and it's 99.9% white male, I'm gonna target them. If I was to look at that demographic and see that it was 99.9% black female, that's who I'm gonna target because that's who's buying the product. I'm not gonna then start to target the 0.1% because it's stunning and brave, or in the case of Sweet Baby Inc., it might secure you a good ESG score / DIE nonsense, and therefore BlackRock and Vanguard might give me a favorable interest rate on a loan so I can make my stuff. Because that is ultimately what it boils down to. This is absolute nonsense. So let's go to the real mask off moment, shall we? How can we implement these anti-customer ideas into our company that can hurt it and ultimately destroy it because it's antithetical to what the actual customer wants? You threaten and bully them into doing it, and Kim's gonna tell you that.
And if you're in development and you are part of like that dominant voice, you're like a cis hetero white dude or just adjacent to that, do not wait until the end to call your consultants. Bring them in at the beginning, and instead of asking them, hey, is this very racist thing we did very racist? Or is this deeply offensive thing we did deeply offensive? Are you hurt by it? Ask them what they want to see. Like, ask them what would thrill them, what would bring them joy. And if you have a team lead, put that request to them very, very early.
Now, don't worry. It gets even better.
If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups. And if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Talk about saying the quiet part out loud. Oh, and by the way, the consultants that she's talking about here are not people within the video game industry. They are people who are not part of the video game industry, but they will come in there to ESG and DIE your company. They're activists. And if you don't get what you want, as Kim herself said, terrify them, threaten them. And if you want to have an example of what a threat could look like to a company, then just check this tweet out. Here's a tweet from Anita Sarkeesian the same year, 2019, directed at CD Projekt Red, who last year or the end of 2022 came out and proudly proclaimed their fealty to the gods of ESG. It reads, "Hey CD Projekt Red, I'm always available for consulting because it sure sounds like you might need it before the whole internet drags you for what sounds like some potentially sexist representations, which we all know you've struggled with in the past." That's how the grift works. Threaten, blackmail, and try to get yourself in and act as a consultant that will push the ESG, DIE, and I'm sure that pays very well indeed for that input. There are plenty of things that I didn't mention that are in this talk. For example, she refers to gamers that don't accept the intersectionality, the inclusion and diversity as piggy babies. Yeah, that's a great way to talk to potential customers, isn't it? But I think I've let Kim Belair tell you exactly what Sweet Baby Inc. is all about in her own words. I'll see you in the next video. You take care. Bye for now.